So you'll be pleased to know that most of what I do in terms of my slides is illustrative rather than essential. Now, you mentioned about being worried, and I think that's a really good place to start, because one of the things I try to do in my lectures about cybersecurity is make sure that you leave the room a little less worried than you were at the start, because what I think can happen is that we read the news and it's very, very easy to panic about staying safe online, about securing our personal data. And actually, I get a little bit irritated with those people who want you to panic. And we're going to see who some of those people are. One of the problems, I think, is that we've made up this word, cybersecurity. So let's go into the prehistory of that, work out how we came to have this term cybersecurity, which I don't know about you. It makes me think of cyborgs, cybermen. I'm going to show my age now. Battlestar Galactica's Cylons. Thank you, Peter. And they're not real. They're from science fiction. So that can make it feel as if cybersecurity is something that is remote from us, that we can do nothing about because it's all about aliens and intergalactic warriors. How did we get here? Well, we got to cyberspace from cybernetics. Norbert Wiener in 1948 came up with this term cybernetics, and it was based on an ancient Greek word, so something that's very close to my heart as a recovering classicist. The Kubernetes, the helmsman, the pilot of a boat. So isn't that a strange etymology for something that we're talking about? IT security, information security, we've got all the way back to a helmsman in ancient Greece. It makes no sense. So forget about that, please. Let's think about information security, online safety, and then hopefully that will feel a little bit more empowering. We also have a ton of different terms for different cyber threats. And I shouldn't really be plugging my Gresham lecture, but what I do in the Gresham lecture on cybersecurity is I go down into this etymology quite a lot to explain what phishing is, what vishing is, what smishing is. All of those things with ware at the end that come from software, but we end up with ransomware, firmware, shareware, etc., etc. Easter eggs, they're lots of fun, but it's the wrong time of year to be talking about Easter eggs. So let's bust out some of these confusing, very technical terms that I think exclude you from feeling like you can do anything about them. What about a botnet? That's a network of robots. And really what we're talking about here is networks of compromised computers or compromised mobile devices that have been infected so that they're hijacked, and then criminals can use that processing power to conduct attacks on websites or on servers, particularly a thing called a denial of service attack, which is really about flooding a website or flooding a service with traffic so that it doesn't work anymore. And if you think that that might be a council service or it might be a utility, that's actually quite a big deal. So if one of your devices becomes part of a botnet, your device is actually unwittingly being used to conduct attacks on other people. And really, from a community perspective, we want to try and avoid that. It's also quite irritating because then your computer or your device runs really slowly because most of what it's doing is somebody else's bidding, not what you want it to do. So what are the steps here? Well, the steps are that you will click on a piece of malicious software, malware, you'll get a virus that will infect your computer, and then your computer will be used to attack other computers. Ideally, what we want to do is stop you clicking on that malware in the first place. But we know that people do. They're not stupid, they're not idiots, they're being manipulated through social engineering. Things like phishing. And social engineering works because for all sorts of reasons, people are vulnerable. You may have just come back from the pub and get an email saying, hey, you look nice, would you like to chat on webcam? That's how those threat vectors work, because it's playing on the fact that things might seem a bit too good to be true. So let's look at some of these examples of social engineering. And these are all emails and approaches that I have received in the last 6 months or so. So here's an email from Tinder. Now, the red flag here is that I'm not on Tinder. Sorry to disappoint you, gentlemen. So I immediately know that there's something a little bit sus about this, because I didn't sign up for this. So what can we do to check, apart from that, whether this is legit? Well, one thing I would always urge you to do, and it depends on your operating system and your browser and your mail client, and whether you've got an Android phone or an iPhone, is to look at the headers in the email. Who is that email really from? Because quite a lot of the time, if it looks too good to be true and they want you to do something, to click on something, to find out who fancies you right now because it's urgent, the chances are it's from someone who's not entirely legit. And when I hover over or click on who Tinder really is, it's from a completely different web domain that is not Tinder. Equally, that find out who button is driving me not to Tinder, but somewhere completely different. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a red flag. Let's have a look at a few more red flags. So, congratulations, dear customer Tesco. That sounds a little bit sus, doesn't it? They don't even know my name here, which is a little bit worrying. However, and I have blacked this out here, they claim to be reproducing some of my account information. Actually, all they've got is my name and my email address, which they can get from lots of different places on the web. We're going to talk about stolen data and password security a little bit later. But what they're trying to do, of course, is convince me that I gave them that information and that they are therefore in a legitimate position to get in touch with me. Yes, so I love congratulations, dear customer Tesco. It is the kind of tailored personal service that you would like from your supermarket, isn't it? Equally, if you want to unsubscribe or you'd like to know more, you can write to 643 North 98th Street Suite, something or other, in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, I don't know about you, but the last time I checked, that's not where Tesco is based. So you can tell, can't you, that it's all designed with the logo to look legit. But the minute you scratch the surface, there are red flags. Why do these things exist? Why are people not trying harder to be convincing? Well, they have to do this at scale. They are sending millions of these things out at once, and what that means is that they're copying and pasting all of these different details because they don't need it to be perfect, they need it to be good enough for people to click on it. This is one of my favourites from a few months ago. It is from somebody called Gong Wang. They have flagged the email for my attention as being very, very important. And it says, hello, I am writing to you with 100% legitimate business preposition that is worth your time and consideration. Obviously, they didn't realise they were dealing with a classicist who gets quite irritated with the idea that someone would mistake preposition for proposition and vice versa. But what is he doing here? I'm guessing it's a he, but that's because I think all bad people are he's. What are they doing here? They are trying to stress the sense of urgency. Yes, the fact that it's 100% legitimate. Methinks the cyber criminal does protest too much, but equally that you need to get in touch with me right now. It's a flag. It's really, really important. It is worth your time and your consideration. please treat these kinds of approaches as if they are live electrical wiring. They will not do you any favours. What else can happen with social engineering? Well, it is made incredibly worth our while by people posing as government agencies, as the authorities. And this can work positively in our interests, or it can also scare the hell out of us. And we're going to look at a couple of examples of that as well. During COVID, we all started to see a lot more of these from HMRC, from people dealing with furlough payments, for instance, and also, of course, you'll be aware, COVID track and trace. So getting those kinds of notifications. Criminals will pose as legitimate officers of the law, government representatives. And when we think to ourselves, wow, I'm getting a tax refund, of course you're going to want to click on it. It's money. We all like money. That doesn't make us greedy. And we started to see these in text messages as well. And this is one that I received. You have an outstanding tax refund. Yes, brilliant. Click on the thing. But as you can probably see, that is not a gov.uk website. But you've just, unfortunately, got to take that split second to stop and think, that doesn't look quite right. Then what about tugging on your heartstrings? Again, I got this one. And really the spoiler for me is that I don't have kids. So if somebody's messaging me saying, hi mum, I think, my gosh, I'm sure I would have known. But I'm sure you will have received these, some of you will have done. Hi mum, phone's damaged, using a friend's. I tell you what, if I had kids, I would make them use punctuation and apostrophes in the right place. So please message my new number on WhatsApp when you get this. And that's all about starting a conversation with a cyber criminal so that they can scam you, so that you can say, for instance, oh, I'm stranded, I need some money, can you get me home, etc. Transfer some payments. Please do not touch these. Oh, not unless you want to have some fun scamming the scammers, but that's a different matter. And if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, we can talk operational security later. My mum has decided she really, really wants to do this, and so I'm having to rapidly train her in how not to be tracked by criminals. But please also think about resisting the temptation to be scared, because cyber criminals really like to scare us into doing things as well. And I would argue, and I've written an entire book about this, which is available from Amazon and better book outlets. Actually, governments scare us about cybersecurity as well. And I think they mean well, but they tend to use imagery like this. And for many years, this was on the FBI's cybercrime help pages. And I think it's unhelpful for a number of reasons. Firstly, we've got cascading binary here. We've got, I'm going to say it's a gentleman, only because of the build, a faceless person in a hoodie who's a magician, magicking numbers out of a keyboard, doing things that you can't do. And I would argue the message is you couldn't possibly understand. I also, in my research, I came to realise that what does this most look like? It most looks like the Grim Reaper. It's like a kind of cyber Grim Reaper. And what we all know about the Grim Reaper is that, apart from in another of my interests, a few traditional English folk songs where somebody cheats him, actually, most of the time, if he's come for you, you are powerless. There is absolutely nothing you can do about it. And I think that representing cybercrime like this is really disempowering. Because unless you're a hacker yourself, the temptation is to look at that and go, well, I don't know how to deal with that. He's a magician. He's doing things with his hands that I don't understand what he's doing. So let's try and strip back that imagery, but also be mindful that criminals like to scare us in that way and portray themselves as these dastardly cyber overlords. Again, this is an email that I received, and it was purporting to be from Microsoft's security team. You might be able to see at the top, no reply at accountsecurity.com. How strange. It didn't come from Microsoft's domain. But equally, you should just be able to see in the red box that the unauthorized attempt to get into my account was purporting to be from Russia. Russia, scary. Isn't that where all the cyber criminals come from? Well, some of them. So that feels legitimate, doesn't it? It feels like, well, maybe if it isn't the right web domain, at least somebody that, it feels legit that that's where the cyber criminal attempt might have come from. But yes, no reply at accountsecurity.com suggests that it might not be entirely official. And when you click on report the user, or don't click, but hover on it, you get alertteam@hotmail.com. Is that legit, would you say?
Yeah.
No, because why would they have a Hotmail address just like everybody else? Why wouldn't they be Microsoft? Other people try to scare us with different kinds of criminal threat. Now, this is what's known as ransomware. Basically, it's software that locks your device and demands that you pay a ransom in order to unlock it. The threat being that all your files are going to be destroyed. You won't be able to get access to all of your data unless you pay the ransom. And as you can see, we've got a kind of V for Vendetta theme here, kind of Guido Fawkes styling, which is pretty scary in itself, I would say. Certainly feels quite underground, all a bit anonymous, hacktivist. And you can see that time is ticking. If you don't pay $125 in 24 hours, it goes up. And of course, we don't want to spend even more money on it. Sorry for these being very blurry, but what happened was I had to capture these screen grabs about 10 years ago. And as you know, camera resolution was a lot worse then. These threats this particular one is no longer in the wild, but variants of them are. So as well as posing as V for Vendetta, you may have people locking your device screens and telling you that they're from law enforcement. It's actually a variant known as police ransomware. And this was from the FBI. And what they do in these cases is the cyber criminals will say, oh, we've caught you doing things you shouldn't have done. We've caught you looking at images and videos you shouldn't. And it's really triggering from the perspective of the worst possible things that you could think of being caught doing, right? So it will quite often be you've been engaging in counter-terrorism online, or you have been looking at child abuse material. And of course, you haven't, but you feel vulnerable about the idea of being caught by somebody. And so it's really about compelling you to make that payment so that you don't have to explain to your family and you don't have to go to court. Now, what do we know really about law enforcement, certainly in the UK and in Europe, is that you tend not to get immediately fined for doing something wrong. You tend to have to go to court. But in the moment, when you feel scared, of course it's quite possible that you will pay this ransom. This is my favourite example, because in terms of imagery, and again, it's quite an old one, so it's quite blurry, it really loads on the imagery, but you'll also be able to notice a couple of red flags. So I used to work for the Serious Organised Crime Agency, and I'm sure the first word used to have a U in it. But it's the good old Metropolitan British Police as well. We have a former Metropolitan Police Commissioner. We have a miscreant being dealt with by two good old British bobbies, and we have the late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II watching over you just in case the law enforcement officers didn't persuade you to pay the ransom. It made it really, really easy for you because you can pay by UCash voucher. And once you've got a voucher, all you have to do is put the number in the box and you've paid the fine. So it's giving you the affordance, a bit like legitimate marketing of, don't worry, you can sort this out really quickly. But also, look at all of this. If you don't do as we tell you to do, you will face the cuffs and you will face the judge's gavel. Of course, what you have to do there is resist the temptation to be scared. It's also about, in addition to previous examples of resisting the temptation to go for something that you think will be of benefit to you, that you think will profit you. So in this situation where we have ransomware, where people are threatening to decrypt your files, to destroy your data, or to pursue you and lock you up, ideally what we want is for you not to click on that malware at all. But that once you have clicked on that malware, if you have security protections in place, like antivirus software, that won't lock your files. So if you've ever wondered, why do I need antivirus software? Why do I need to update my browser? Why do I need to update my operating system? This is why. Because antivirus companies, the big providers, but also increasingly, even operators like Microsoft, like Google, operating systems, they're tracking all the new threats, the new pieces of malicious software and malware as it comes out into the wild. And they're running scans to identify when those are on your devices, and they're removing them. So that's why information security people will always say to you, keep your software up to date. Because if your software is up to date, you are much more likely to be in a position to defend against malicious software, even when you have mistakenly downloaded it. So if we think back to 2017, there was a cyber attack called the WannaCry ransomware attack. And that's quite famous because it didn't target the NHS, but the NHS almost accidentally became impacted by WannaCry. WannaCry is purported to be to have had its origins in a group operating out of North Korea, and it was designed to generate profit. So it was a financially motivated gang of cyber criminals who may or may not, allegedly, have been generating funds for the North Korean government. Yes, some countries do actually have a certain percentage of their GDP coming from cybercrime because it's so lucrative. And what happened in the NHS was that a load of computers weren't running the most up-to-date version of publicly available Windows software. And as a result, they were accidentally targeted. They weren't the target, but it meant that a load of NHS PCs couldn't work anymore. And there has been a report suggesting that that did disrupt healthcare in a number of NHS trusts. So it has a real world impact on people's offline physical safety and security as well. And all that needed to happen was that the software was kept up to date. I have a particular research interest in connected medical devices because about just over a decade ago, my father was fitted with an implantable pacemaker, cardioverter defibrillator. And that was using Bluetooth to communicate to a base station in his house. And that base station was using his home internet connection, his broadband, to report his heart function to his cardiologist at the hospital. These are incredibly brilliant things. If you have one of those, don't worry. I'm not going to say to you, oh no, they're very dangerous, you shouldn't be using them. They're fantastic. They are prolonging people's lives. Similarly, insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors that are in a closed loop and dosing people when their blood sugar level falls too high or too low. But they're using communications technology. And so they need to be cyber secure. Software needs to be up to date. You need to be able to protect yourselves against social engineering. And when we think about things like this, we have connected prosthetics. So people's arms are being controlled by Bluetooth, So it's all cyber now. It's all information security now. And it seems to me that if people's health and well-being depends on good cybersecurity, then we absolutely all need to be doing it. Okay, so let's imagine the worst case scenario. You're a victim of ransomware. You've downloaded the software by mistake, and it has locked your files. It sounds like the worst thing possible. It sounds like the only thing you can do is pay the ransom. But actually, a bunch of fabulous people from one of my old agencies, Europol, European Police Office, and a load of cybersecurity providers, they got together and thought, well, we can find the decryption tools to unlock people's locked files and devices, and we can make them publicly available on a website where you can just download them. And so that's what they've done, and it's called No More Ransom. And you can just Google No More Ransom, and it will take you there. And so if you are ever in that worst case scenario where your device is locked, you can still go somewhere. It isn't necessarily something that you can do nothing about. Okay, final example. What about passwords? If you think about this as being a kind of old school password, combination lock, why do we always keep going on to people about having strong passwords? Let's have a look at a couple of examples. If your password is leaked and you're using the same password across a number of different services, like loads of different social media and your bank account, and you're not changing it regularly, then they don't just get into your bank and your online wallets. They also get into your email and your social contacts, and they also may get into your office. They may get into your work network. That's why we always say use different strong passwords. What's the impact of that? Well, of course, with anything financial, it's going to be that they're taking your money, which is bad enough in itself. But if you're using the same password across all of those, they could then target all of your contacts. And I don't know about you, but I will be the first to admit that I have been in that situation where my email has been hacked. And then everybody has got in touch with me and said, are you really in Bangkok? Are you really in hospital? Thankfully, some people are sensible enough to question that. Once you're in a work environment, there are all sorts of things that people can do with your password. They can get access to proprietary information, intellectual property, research and development. They can target your boss. That would be quite embarrassing. So if you have that same password and you don't change it, and that happens to be leaked through no fault of your own because somebody else's website has been hacked, for instance, it is a little bit, isn't it, like leaving your house open. Or actually, I would say it's even worse than that. It's like saying, oh, I've got a bike as well, and I've got a car. It's in the garage. Let me show you where all of these things are. Because if you think about it, someone's in your email account, they can see all the other services you use for which you have used that email address as a contact. They find out, for instance, what bank you bank with. So they can have a go getting into your bank account, have a go at getting into your Amazon account, for instance. So I hope I managed to persuade you that it really is quite a good idea to have different passwords for different things and to change them. Quick spot quiz. Which of these passwords is best, do you think, from a security perspective? Do you know, that's a great answer. All of them are absolutely terrible. You're quite right. They're absolutely terrible for different reasons. The top one is just, password. We'll change a couple of things. Obviously, that's the lazy option. The bottom one, if you are taking part in social media quizzes where people say, what's the name of your first pet? And And do you remember this TV show from 1966? Or, well, no, you probably wouldn't if you were born, but you know what I mean. Trying to divulge personal information. It's guessable. It's guessable. And, I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit unfair, but I would say don't do those social media quizzes. Why do people want to know information about your personal data? Also, don't use those ones where you upload your face. They've got your face. Sorry, I could bang on about that for a long time. So, is that even if your password is leaked through no fault of your own because, say, a company's, a retail site's web server has been hacked, if you're using different passwords, they can't get in to everything else. How do you find out, though? How would you know if your password has been leaked? Well, the good news is that there is a site, or a number of sites actually, but one that I like to use is called Have I Been Pwned? And so again, just Google that. You can put your email address in and it will tell you whether whether those credentials have popped up in any public data breaches. Now, you should be changing your passwords regularly anyway, but it's a good starter for 10. But if you know one of them has been compromised, that's when you need to change everything. Now, if you're using different passwords, though, not so bad. So, password strength is important. And when we talk about cybersecurity, a lot of us who work in the industry, we talk about successful cybersecurity, successful information security being about three things. The holy trinity, if you like, of cybersecurity is people, process, and technology. And I think those three recommendations for how you can keep yourselves safe and secure online speak to that triangle. That people, it's about us hardening ourselves as targets for manipulation, for social engineering. For the process, it's about making sure you have those different passwords, and whether you use a password manager or whether you let your browser or your operating system store those passwords for you, which you will know they can do for you on your phone, for instance. And actually, thinking of that, just very briefly, we do have such things as dual-factor, multi-factor authentication. So if you use an iPhone, you know that you've got facial recognition now. And that once you're into that phone, you can access all of your different passwords without having to remember them. It's making use of the technological solutions that we have available to us to keep safe and secure. And also with that multi-factor authentication, what we mean by that is setting it up so that if you want to access your bank account, you have to get a text message with a code to get into that bank account or any other service. The reason being is that way, even if somebody has your password, there's an extra layer, an extra hurdle that they have to get over. So, worth investing in those. And then the technology is keeping the software up to date. With those three things, you're not going to fight every cyber threat. You're not going to fight necessarily the Russian intelligence agencies who want to, get into the government agency that you work for. What we've been focusing on today is much more on the consumer side of all of us keeping safe as individuals in the interests of time. But you are going to be able to counteract a lot of the threats that would lose you money or make you feel unsafe. So, basic checks, that social engineering side. Looking at who an email is really from, looking behind that big red button that they want you to click to see who fancies you. Password hygiene that we've talked about, and keeping either antivirus software or making sure that your software is up to date. Now, I believe that cybersecurity is a public health issue. And in fact, I have an entire lecture on cybersecurity as a public health issue. But I hope what I've managed to do with the scenarios that we've described is show you how actually, when you become a victim of cybercrime, it's not just you, because you can then be used to target your loved ones, your friends, your family, your work networks. And so the better you can be at protecting yourself, the less harm other people are going to come to. So it's a community effort. And so I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a larger army of people standing up to protect themselves so that they can protect other people as well, and protect the organisations that they work for instance. And I think that we can treat it a little bit like we did COVID, or like we do flu jabs, the common cold every winter. And I haven't had time for it today, but one of the things we did was we said, well, what if we made a series of short movies about keeping software up to date, not clicking suspicious links? You know, if someone tells you you've won a massive yacht, the chances are you haven't won a massive yacht. Using strong passwords so that you're not using fluffy 1966 that people could guess. And we took inspiration from the 1940s public information films, Coughs and Sneezes. So what if we can bring that keep calm, carry on mentality to cybersecurity? So it's not about faceless Grim Reapers in hoodies, magicking zeros and ones out of thin air. It's actually more about the man or woman on the Clapham omnibus and what they might do to protect themselves. So please, if you'd like the links for those, I would be very, very happy to share them with you, because I'm very proud of them. I think they're hilarious, but then I wrote them. But the main thing I think we want to do, and the thrust behind that, is that you really, really don't need to panic about cybersecurity, despite the jargon, despite its very name. And that's precisely what some people want you to do. They want you to panic. Whereas really what I want you to do is to protect yourselves and each other. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed. I was going to say you could find me on Twitter or X, but I'm not sure anybody's using that anymore. I am there. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find all of the Gresham lectures as well. Also on YouTube. And thank you very much indeed. I'm very happy to take some questions.